Have you ever wondered what exactly happens when a person leaves this world? What happens to the spirit when it leaves a person's body? Is there really a life after death? And do heaven and hell exist? And what about the reincarnation that Buddhists believe in? These are just some of the questions we all ask ourselves throughout our existence. And we are not always able to give ourselves convincing and definitive answers, since it is difficult to blindly believe in a specific vision. In this video, thanks to a Zen story and partly also to science, we will explore what happens to the spirit when it leaves the body. It will be a fascinating, exciting, and mystical journey. So stay until the end, because you will clarify the questions you have always asked yourself. But before continuing, if you are not yet one of us, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to be informed when we publish new content. In the heart of the mountains, in a remote region of Japan, stands an ancient Buddhist temple in which the monk Kuniaki has been holding his lessons for years. While the dim light of the main hall was interrupted only by a faint light coming from the oil lanterns, and while the scent of incense enveloped the air in a mystical embrace, the monk answered the disciples' questions on one of the most engaging and mysterious. Kuniaki, after meditating for a few minutes, opened his eyes and stared at his disciples with a penetrating gaze. What happens to the spirit when it leaves the body of a person who leaves? He asked in a calm but meaningful voice. The monk's question resonated in the silence of the temple, enveloping the people present in an atmosphere full of mystery and curiosity. I've always wondered that they all thought to themselves, what happens after the last breath has been held and the soul is free from the body that has hosted it all its life? Kuniaki asked again, is there a spiritual realm beyond the veil of death? Insisted the master, letting his gaze get lost in the void, as if peering beyond the confines of the physical world. His disciples exchanged glances full of unanswered questions, eager to know the truth hidden behind the veil of death. With a slight smile, the elderly monk prepared to reveal to them the secrets of the soul and its journey beyond earthly life. His words, he was aware of it, would strike everyone's hearts. It was the beginning of a story that would capture their hearts and lead them down a path of discovery, enlightenment, and spiritual growth. Dear disciples, he said, today I will try to answer the questions that I have anticipated and that you have always had within you. To do this, I will tell you about a Western psychologist and psychotherapist. This researcher has dedicated much of his existence to exploring the mysteries of the soul through the art of regressive hypnosis, and has arrived at conclusions as fascinating as they are realistic. Michael Newton, this is his name, made an extraordinary journey into the depths of the human unconscious, searching for traces of our previous lives and our destiny in the afterlife. He firmly states that the soul is a tangible reality and that its journey after leaving the physical body is well delineated. According to his studies and research, deceased souls are welcomed and guided by beings of light in their passage to the afterlife. So they are not alone. It is as if they were being held by the hand. Faced with these words, many of the people present were moved and felt relieved. The mere idea that their loved ones, in the most delicate moment of their existence, were not alone filled them with joy. The souls, Kuniaki continued, once they arrive in the spiritual world, land in a sort of port. This is how most subjects under hypnosis describe it, where they are collected to then be directed to their own group of membership. Analyzing the various stories, Newton understood that souls are grouped based on their level of consciousness or by affinity. In fact, there are also companion souls, that is, kindred souls who work towards common objectives, who come together to continue their journey together. But before returning to their own group, each soul must appear before what Newton calls the Council of Elders, made up of very ancient and evolved souls, to be able to examine their earthly actions. This is a time of deep introspection and acceptance, the monk explained, where you evaluate your actions during your earthly life and plan for your next incarnation. And speaking of reincarnation, Kuniaki described how every soul, after having assimilated earthly experiences, must undertake a new evolutionary path through new lives. It is an endless cycle of spiritual learning and growth, the monk added, guided by the intuition and love of our spiritual guides. In the solemn and mystical silence of the monastery, the disciples listened with respect and admiration to the monk's story of the research of Dr. Newton, a man who peered into the deepest recesses of the human soul in search of truth. And one of them, with tears in his eyes, asked, "Master Kuniaki, can you tell us about the various levels of the soul? How can we divide and distinguish these levels?" "My children," replied the monk with a solemn tone, Dr. Newton, during his research, identified 3 different stages of development of the soul, and I personally am very inclined to believe in this theory. To start with, we have the beginner souls, that is, those who have been reincarnating for a long time, but who unfortunately remain immature in their evolutionary path. They are unable to fully fulfill their soul task. This means that these souls cannot yet resonate with the frequency or vibration needed to transcend time and space. You must know, my dears, that the majority of souls incarnated on Earth are in this first level of development. They are poorly developed souls and are not yet able to exercise their spiritual will. And this often makes them dominated by selfishness and self-centeredness, because they are still trapped in the chains of earthly social structures. In short, they still need time to detach themselves from it. While the disciples reflected on every single word, the monk, with profound wisdom, continued his story by talking about the intermediate souls. These souls, he said, are in a transition phase in which the soul gradually evolves and becomes increasingly aware of its responsibilities and the path it is taking and must take. These souls incarnate less quickly than beginners, have a more direct and fruitful relationship with their spiritual guides, and face the trials of life with the aim of becoming spiritual guides themselves. Looking up at his disciples, who were increasingly involved in the monk's lesson, Kuriaki introduced the 3rd level, that of evolved souls. The evolved souls, my dears, represent the culmination of the spiritual path that we are talking about and that Dr. Newton talks about. These souls are ancient souls, now free from earthly burdens. They no longer struggle with the existential problems of earthly life, but are focused on individual improvement and spreading a spiritual message. While incarnating, these souls maintain an introspective outlook and are guided by patience and resilience. They don't always appear as public figures, far from it. They remain on the sidelines. They are souls who focus less on social issues, but rather on the betterment of the individual himself, as they prepare to become spiritual leaders. When the soul leaves the body, it tends to remember, with more or less attachment, earthly experiences, and may have difficulty continuing its journey, added Kumiaki. However, the reincarnation journey, once begun, must necessarily be completed, and on this journey, Each soul is faced with important questions and decisions about continuing on their path. Through the gift of visions, souls have the opportunity to explore different possibilities of incarnation, assisted by spiritual guides who illuminate their path. Imagine a cinema where souls can see the various choices available and decide what their next choice will be incarnation. However, added the monk with an expression of profound serenity. Before we are reincarnated, we must go through the council of elders that we spoke about, where we are helped to understand the spiritual tasks that await us in our next life. Dear disciples, in these words of Dr. Newton, I see the age-old wisdom of our ancient spiritual traditions shining, the monk set with calm and determination. What it teaches us is that every soul, regardless of its stage of evolution, has the potential to grow, learn, and transform. Remember that each of us has the sacred task of illuminating our own path, guided by inner light and universal love, and that the cycle of reincarnation continues, offering us endless opportunities for spiritual growth and fulfillment.